Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, getting into August 8th, 2013. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. Manny is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. I've been listening to this Phyllis Schlafly news break that has been added to our show format here at RBN. And while I don't agree with her on absolutely everything, especially when she gets into the issue about gays and religion, I do find myself agreeing with her more and more about a lot of the issues she raises. And I wanted to comment about the little blurb she just did about Common Core and this idea of keeping a permanent record on every single kid as they grow up to then turn over potentially to their employers and certainly to the government. And I remember when I was a kid in grade school, teachers would tell us there was a permanent record of what you did that would follow you through life if you didn't behave. Back then it was a bluff. Today, obviously, it is not. And I cannot think of anything more guaranteed to destroy the creativity and innovation of our children than this constant awareness that every single thing they do will be kept on record for the rest of their life. Is there no forgiveness or redemption in our current society? I mean, think about your own background. We have all done things we're embarrassed about. We have misbehaved. And by the way, the tendency to go outside the rules is a hallmark of creative, inventive people. Thomas Edison is a good example. He was rowdy as a kid. And then he went on to invent so many very useful things, including the stock market ticker tape machine, electric filament lighting, the phonograph, the movie camera. Now, what would have happened if there had been a permanent record back then? Oh, there's this Thomas Edison. He misbehaved when he was in the 5th grade. We're not going to hire him onto the railroad telegrapher's office. What would have happened to American industry and creativity? Now, there's a movie out called October Sky. It was on the air a little while ago. And it's based on the true story of a guy named Homer Hickam. This was the son of a coal miner who went into model rocketry as a kid. And he did fight his school. There was only one sympathetic teacher, which helped him eventually win a science fair. But his whole community was against him. Oh, he's bad. He's doing things he ought not to do. And, of course, he wound up being a NASA engineer on the space shuttle. Now, what if there had been a permanent record? And they said, Homer Hickam doesn't play by the rules, doesn't do as he's told. Kids who are acting outside the box, playing with stuff they're told not to play with, that's usually one of the earliest warnings, flags that you've got a budding genius that may be on the path to discovering the real cure for cancer or clean energy or a way to convince the money junkies not to start World War III as a way of evading the collapse of their pyramid scheme central bank. This is an absolute disaster. I think kids should be allowed to be kids and give vent to their natural curiosity. I think the permanent record of a child should be their accomplishments and achievements and nothing else. So I'm in agreement with Phyllis Schlafly on that one. Now, if I seem a little testy and irritated today, it's because during my show prep, I wound up having to spend a little bit of time pulling yet another piece of malware out of my computer that was inserted surreptitiously. And it's a very benign piece of malware. It's just a browser hijacker where it puts their search engine in place, redirects my homepage to their thing, and apparently tacks on links to any web links on my desktop so that when I click them, it goes first to their page and then routes through to the destination for, I guess, readership, ads. I really don't know what. And as I was removing it, of course, it popped up the message, "We're sorry to see you go. Our little tool here is one of the most useful you'll ever find, and it really will make your life a lot better." I don't care. I don't care if their little tool was the best thing to come along since floppy disks When you put it on my machine without my permission, I am going to get angry, and I'm going to pull it out by the roots. I don't care how useful it is. The arrogance on display by these cyber criminals and hijackers is just amazing. And again, since PRISM has all of this information on the internet, why aren't they shutting down the malware writers and cyber hijackers? Why are they not being targeted if this NSA spying is all about crime and terror? The system doesn't really seem to do much of anything useful at all. And I think that's in part because they're gathering up all this data and there's really too much to really evaluate. They're now basically coming out and admitting this so-called 20-person conference call that led to the current terror scare didn't come from NSA. Somebody else, some unknown foreign government reported it to the United States. Gee, I wonder who that was. Peter King is out there on the news right now saying Al-Qaeda is in many ways stronger than before 9/11. He's out there selling you the new, improved Al-Qaeda, stronger than before, with new added ingredients and a brand new packaging. It's a sales campaign. The new, improved Al-Qaeda is on the store shelves right now by the same folks who brought you the old Al-Qaeda. Remember, only a few months ago, Al-Qaeda was all but destroyed. Al-Zawahiri was the only leader left, even though he'd been dead and resurrected several times. All of the top Al-Qaeda were in prison. And then all of a sudden, when Obama needs a new terror threat, there are all these prison breaks that let Al-Qaeda out there again. And Al-Zawahiri is out there being promoted as the new Osama bin Laden. Now, Peter King is sort of kind of correct in saying the chatter we are seeing is just like what was seen before 9/11. Yeah, there's a lot of chatter on the corporate news networks extolling the evils of Al-Qaeda and Emmanuel al-Zawahiri, just like the weeks leading up to 9/11. Now, back then I was spending a lot of time over at Free Republic, and the news was just always Osama bin Laden, saturation coverage. He hadn't really done anything to justify that kind of total news coverage, and I commented at Free Republic, this feels like a public relations campaign pre-selling this guy. Something's going to happen, they're going to blame on this guy, and we're being told ahead of time who to blame when the big bang happens. At which point I was pretty much kicked out of Free Republic. And this is an exact repeat. For those of you who were paying attention before 9/11, there was this constant media campaign ahead of time. Oh yes, Al-Qaeda is dangerous. Al-Qaeda is bad. Osama bin Laden is coming to get you. And we're seeing a repeat right now with Emmanuel al-Zawahiri. Right out of the pages of 1984. It's an ad campaign. So that when something goes boom, the American people will be pre-brainwashed to just go along when the corporate news says, oh yes, it's Al-Qaeda. Yes, it's those bad people over there. We've got to launch another war. It's the same exact PR campaign to pre-condemn the patsy ahead of a new false flag. Been there, done that, do not want the T-shirt. All righty, let's see. We've got time enough to take one quick phone call before the break. Tim in Wisconsin, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I wanted to say something to what you were saying about how there's no forgiveness in society. How much I can really agree with you because of like when it comes to me, there's this place called Figgies, both in Marshfield here in Wisconsin and also Wisconsin Rapids. Or maybe Stevens Point.
Okay, we're running out of time. Can you get to the point?
I was.
Yeah.
And the last time I tried to get a job at the one either in Wisconsin Rapids or Stevens Point here in Wisconsin, they wouldn't give me, wouldn't hire me because of my record, for when I did work at Figgies when I was a teenager,
Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Tim. I'll answer when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And responding to Tim in Wisconsin, I think most people would agree it's reasonable for companies that you work for to keep a record of your job performance, especially if you want to seek to return to work to that company. What I'm talking about is a system that makes all of your misdeeds a permanent record for the rest of your life. And it precludes the possibility that people can do some questionable things in their youth and then go on to great accomplishments, like Thomas Edison. There are some people who will do something in a moment of wild youthful exuberance, and in the aftermath they feel so bad about it they reform their lives. They learn from the mistake. They say, I'm not going to do that again. And they move forward. But this whole idea of a permanent record of every minor transgression that will basically affect the rest of your life removes from our social structure the possibility of forgiveness. And if there is no possibility of forgiveness, there's no motivation for reform. Oh, I screwed up. It's going to curse the rest of my life. I got caught shoplifting. I'll never get a decent job. I'll never get a promotion. I'll never be allowed into XYZ. I might as well go on shoplifting. If we're going to have self-improvement in humans, we have to have the ability to move beyond youthful transgressions. It's just common sense. And so I'm very much in agreement with Phyllis Schlafly on this. We have to recognize kids are going to be kids, and sometimes they're going to do some stupid things. And hopefully they won't hurt themselves or others around them. Obviously, in extreme cases like setting dogs on fire on a habitual basis, somebody ought to be paying attention to that. But kids just being kids, we got to cut them some slack, or we're going to stifle the very people on whom our future progress in technology, science, politics rests. That's my whole point about that. Alrighty, apparently the Pentagon is now conducting a new program training the states, state security, that if you are unhappy with U.S. foreign policy, you might be a threat. Starting to sound like an old Jeff Foxworthy routine. They have a long list of things that might categorize you as a high threat, meaning a terror threat. We've already seen the list coming out of MIAC and the fusion centers of the things you can do that would make you a terrorist threat, like talking about the Constitution. The FBI was actually teaching that to police departments a couple of years back. If they're talking about the Constitution, they're a terror suspect. And apparently the new list includes anybody that is unhappy with U.S. foreign policy, which I would presume would be the families of everybody who's come back from that foreign policy in a cheap metal box, if at all. If you have money troubles, you might be a high threat, which right now is 95% of the entire American population. And of course, anybody who speaks openly questioning U.S. foreign policy is a high threat. I guess I hit the trifecta on that one here. Meanwhile, over at the House of Representatives, their hearings into the IRS targeting of political dissidents has now expanded to include the Federal Elections Commission, because it has come out that the IRS and the Federal Elections Commission were colluding with each other, targeting political groups and dissidents opposed to Obama and his policies. This is a very clear violation of the law. The Internal Revenue Service is not allowed to share your tax information with anybody unless there is an actual ongoing criminal investigation for which there is a warrant signed by a judge. So it's a huge, huge scandal. Misuse of the IRS like this was one of the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. It should be an article of impeachment against Barack Obama. I know there are a lot of grassroots groups getting ready to do banners off of freeway overpasses calling for Obama's impeachment. And I encourage people to voice their displeasure peacefully with protests. But we know this Congress isn't going to do it. They're completely co-opted. They'll never stand up to him. Meanwhile, we're hearing that this phony terror alert is being extended. They're keeping the foreign embassies closed. It's horrible. We're up to peached open mob in the whatever the current terror threat index is. And they're all claiming that this is proof that the NSA terror program works. And of course, it is not, because it's already come out that this particular terror threat warning did not originate with the NSA. And the whole premise behind this terror threat, that 20 top Al-Qaeda people, knowing that all global communications are being eavesdropped on going back to the Echelon program of the 1980s, just decided to have a conference call and say, oh, we're going to go hit the United States of America. Now, with the revelation that the source of this so-called conference call intercept actually came from an unnamed foreign government, it raises the possibility it's another complete hoax. Viktor Ostrovsky, ex-Mossad agent. He's living, I think, in Arizona. He's working as an artist now. He does paintings for local galleries and everything down there. But he's a former Mossad agent. He's written a couple of books about how the Mossad operates. And in one of those books, by way of deception, he details how Israel smuggled a radio transmitter into Tripoli and started sending radio traffic calling for terror attacks on frequencies they knew the United States was listening to, using codes they knew the United States could break. And that was how Israel tricked Ronald Reagan into bombing Libya and trying to target Gaddafi himself. They missed him and got his 5-year-old daughter. So these kind of deceptions are ongoing. So if the United States government didn't just make up this whole conference call out of thin air, they may be a willing victim of another Israeli hoax. But there is no way this story is real of a conference call among the top 20 Al-Qaeda in a world where they, more than anybody else, know the phone systems are compromised. It's just not going to happen. They're not stupid. Anybody who believes that, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. Justin Amash is out there saying President Obama was highly misleading in claiming there's no domestic spying program. Of course he was highly misleading. He was lying. Let's call it what it is. He lied to you yet again. They're watching everything. We had these other NSA whistleblowers saying, yes, the content of the phone calls is being saved. The New York Times is now doing a limited hangout by admitting that, yes, the content of phone calls is being saved, and internet content is being saved, if it mentions any overseas suspects, which is a very, very huge list. And obviously this means people who are not necessarily communicating with the suspects, but merely talking about them, which we do a lot on our website and our radio show. And with the idea that they're saving all connections and content to at least 3 degrees of separation, it's open season on American communication. More and more around the world, we're getting commentary from the foreign press and the independent media that Barack Obama, with regards to Edward Snowden, has basically shot himself in the foot. He mishandled this situation terribly with regards to Russia. And as Russia puts it quite accurately, they're disappointed that Obama doesn't want to meet with Putin, but they didn't create this situation. The U.S. government created this situation by hiring people into a government that was supposed to be following the Bill of Rights, clearly violated that and created a moral crisis among their own workers, which is now why they're using terror tactics against their own people. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show and taking a quick peek at the corporate media here. Apparently, some of the legal team in the on the defense side in the Fort Hood terror trial want off the case, which tells us that it's already starting to fall apart. They're trying to claim it was an act of terrorism. At the time it happened, the sources we had was that a group of soldiers who thought they were done with their military career, they'd had 3 tours of duty over in the war zone, they thought they were going to be allowed to go home, and they were told, no, stop loss, we're sending you back one more time. They freaked out, shot a bunch of people, didn't want the rest of the military to know there was actual mutiny already taking place in the rank and file, so they blamed the convenient Muslim, and they're off and running. And now part of his legal team is saying, we really want to get out of this thing. It's already getting crazy over there. Apparently Obama is still out there on the campaign trail, trying to convince America he loves and cares about the people, trying to push Obamacare and carbon taxes and the rest of it. And the polling is showing the vast majority of Americans are simply not paying attention to him any longer. Big shock on that one. The man has lost all credibility. We have a government that has zero credibility, which means they can't really function other than waving guns and tasers and drones at you to force you to go along with their dictates. And that's obviously not what America is supposed to be about. Going to grab a couple of phone calls here. Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Michael. I'm just calling up to talk about the terror alert and how this week, last couple of days, has been just wonderful for comedic effect. What with the big Al Qaeda conference call.
Yes.
The fact that Al Qaeda chemists have discovered a way to make clothes into bombs.
Yes.
We're winning against Al Qaeda is what Obama just said, the other day, and at the same time we're supplying them.
It is. I mean, for propaganda to work against the population, it's got to be internally self-consistent. It's got to present a worldview that makes sense. And this stuff simply does not. That one about exploding clothes was just funny. I made a graphic to go with that. Anybody who actually understands explosives knows that a thin sheet of explosive or a thread will burn quite rapidly, but it's not going to create a compression or shock wave that's going to cause any kind of damage. This is basically on the same level as the crotch bomber. It sounds good as a news bite to an uneducated public, but for anybody who's actually worked with explosives or understands them at all, it's a joke. It really is a joke. And remember, what causes the damage from a bombing is the bomb case. The little metal jacket around it that breaks into pieces, and those pieces fly out to shrapnel at high rates of velocity. Obviously, exploding clothes aren't going to have that. And it's going to be a bright flash, and you're going to have your terrorists standing there completely naked after it's all over, and the TSA are going to change their rubber gloves and go back to doing whatever it is they like to do. It is. It really is a joke. It would be funny if it was not so alarming that it looks like, again, this is exactly the kind of public relations run-up we were seeing in the media before 9/11. I think they're seriously considering doing something dramatic. And they're already pre-selling Emmanuel al-Zawahiri as the new uber villain we're all supposed to be afraid of. Again, it's just matching exactly that public relations run-up we saw before 9/11.
Michael, I by the way, just as an aside, didn't they say they killed Zawahiri about 10 times?
It's been a bunch. It's been a bunch, but he's like the ever-ready bunny of terror. He keeps going and going and going and going.
But my favorite though is the Al Qaeda conference call.
Yes.
The big board of directors conference call that they held in the clear. I love that. That's just great.
Yeah, it is. It's great. Al-Zawahiri is out there saying, "All right, guys, look, it's Ramadan. We can't eat. We're fasting. There's nothing on TV. I've seen The Bourne Identity 16 times already. What should we do here? I don't know. Let's go and attack the United States." It's a joke. It is an absolute joke.
Hey, one more thing, if I could cover with you, Michael. I saw on another site, I think it was Information Clearinghouse, a couple of days ago, where somebody was raising a question if maybe small, clean tactical nukes have already been used, and they had a video of one of these major bombing events. I think it's one of the deals where the Israelis came in with their submarines and tried to wipe out the Russian anti-aircraft SAM system stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the explosion seen from several miles away,
mm-hmm.
and it was either the largest fuel air detonation I've ever seen, and I've seen some,
mm-hmm.
or it was a small nuke, and I wonder if you've seen that.
I've seen it, and I don't think there's enough evidence to say an actual nuke was used. It may have been, it may not have been, we don't really know. But you do need to remember any sufficiently large explosion will produce a mushroom-shaped cloud. And if, in fact, this attack did strike a warehouse holding munitions, they would have all gone off and resulted in a much larger explosion than what the weapon itself would have produced. Now, given that they were going after what we think was a hard target, I don't know that they would have used a fuel-air bomb. That's usually used for unfortified surface targets over a wide area, but they would have used a bunker buster, would have gone in there, ignited everything, and set it all off. Think about the USS Arizona. And the films of that huge explosion, obviously much, much bigger than the bomb the Japanese actually dropped on it would have caused, because they hit a magazine. Right.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting to look at it, and I contend that it's a possibility, probably not a probability, but a possibility.
I agree, it's possible. We know that some of the bunker busters the United States have been developing are nuclear tipped. We know that Israel is arming the cruise missiles on their Dolphin-class submarines with nuclear warheads. And unfortunately, the reason I'm so concerned about the escalating war here is the United States lacks the 3 M's, the manpower, the manufacturing, and the money to prevail in conventional war on 2 continents, and that means the use of nuclear weapons by the United States is now an inevitability.
Well, I definitely agree with that. But, Michael, remember a couple of years ago when they bombed what they said was a Syrian suspected nuclear site?
Yes.
Remember?
Mm-hmm.
And there was apparently some residue problems there that were questionable. But
yeah. If you're going to bomb, they're back to talking about bombing Iran's nuclear facilities. If they use a small tactical nuclear weapon, they can claim the leftover radiation proves they were building nuclear bombs down there. I mean,
that's right.
Because what they're making in Iran's power station is uranium. And if they used a multi-stage weapon with plutonium, the plutonium residue will be blamed on Iran. I can guarantee you that at this point.
Well,
okay?
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike. Talk to you later.
All right. We're going to switch over to Steve in Florida. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Mikey. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good. Hey, as you were talking yesterday toward the end of the show about how to communicate with people and, not to preach to people, but just gently invite them across the bridge and so forth. But I think there are various ways of communicating with people. And I think the fine arts are really powerful in that regard.
They are. My wife feels the same way. That's why she's written all those songs, like In Times of War, which I think is a very, very powerful piece.
Yes. But you know what I would think you would be good at?
Yes.
Is to do a stand-up comedy routine. No, you would.
No, I'm laughing because I briefly, when I was in my early career, I actually did stand up. I was at the Ice House. I got to work with and meet Billy Crystal and everything. I do have a presentation all set to go when I get to a point where I'm starting to make public appearances and everything. The idea is riding a very fine line because you don't want to just completely depress your audience with the reality of what's going on, but you don't want to make so many jokes that people just say, oh, it's just a comedy routine and it's not to be taken serious. I think the master of that, of course, was George Carlin, who was talking about some immensely important things. And he did it in a way that people could laugh at and accept, and then they'd go home and think. And that is absolutely the mark of a master.
I just thought I'd throw that out to you, Mike. I know you'd be excellent at it.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And it's an idea that's crossed my mind. And again, I had a lot of fun in New York a couple of years back when I was doing my presentation on 9/11, which I had to cut short because Richard Gage's film was debuting, and I didn't want to keep the audience away from that, so I cut that off short. But yeah, it's an idea using comedy to try and get these ideas through to people. And I don't do enough of it here on the show. I'll be honest about that. All right, we got to take another break for commercials. Thank you for the call. Steve will be back with Mike in Texas after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're going to go back to the phones. Mike in Texas. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Well, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions in regard, since we're talking about nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
I consider, from my information that I have over the last period of 3 years, is nuclear weapons is just another boogie there, because you cannot implement a nuclear weapons strike anytime you want to, any place. It's got to be timed with planetary positions in order to...
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Sorry, it just
not.
doesn't.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, let us
All
hear
right.
your point of view. I've got several different so-called researchers that say differently.
Well, first of all, a nuclear bomb, it's just a much more powerful form of explosive, and it's not linked to planetary alignments at all. Now, in theory, the United States cannot initiate a nuclear strike offensively, unprovoked, without invoking what's called the two-man rule, but I wouldn't want to bet my nation on that one. Nuclear bombs come in a couple of different flavors. The ones that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the very earliest designs. Hiroshima was hit with the little boy bomb, which was a uranium bomb, where you have two subcritical masses of uranium at each end of a pipe, and they're shoved together to form the critical mass, and it goes bang. There, you now all have the secret to the uranium nuclear bomb, so you're all now on the White House's special high-interest targets list. Fat Man was dropped to demonstrate that the United States had mastered the far more complex plutonium implosion bomb. Now, it's a much more difficult beast to make than the uranium bomb, because you've got a plutonium core. Inside of it is some metallic compound that, when compressed, will start giving up neutrons. I think they made the first ones out of lithium and polonium. And it's surrounded by an explosive jacket that crushes the plutonium down to a density where it will start capturing the neutrons flying out of the plutonium as it fizzles. And from there they went to the multi-stage weapons, where they would have a small nuclear core surrounded by hydrogen fusion material, deuterium-based, more recently tritium-based, but they will fire off anytime the control systems say they should fire off. And no, in point of fact, there is nothing. They're not governed by astrology or Miss Cleo with her crystal ball. We're going to switch over to George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I was posting that story about the Waco police searching apartment complexes without a search warrant or any probable cause.
Yes.
It just made me come up with a question. I'm going to probably make a T-shirt out of it and say, are you tired of the government keeping you safe yet? And putting on the back Ben Franklin's quote of trading liberty for security and deserving none.
Well, I would put on the back with that, of course, the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And I understand the police are starting to do this all across the country, where they will simply randomly walk into homes for what they're calling a security and safety check and just poke around looking for things to make trouble over. And it is, in fact, completely unconstitutional for them to do that, because the government is not allowed to just come on into your home and start poking through your stuff unless they have pre-existing evidence of a crime supported by oath or affirmation. Somebody has to say, this person is committing a crime, before the police can even knock on your door. The police aren't following the rules. The government aren't following the rules. And as a matter of fact, I got an email earlier today. There's a growing movement across America of people simply saying, I withdraw my allegiance to this government. I don't. So this idea that we recognize this is a completely illegitimate government is starting to spread across the country.
Well, the thing is, landlord where I'm restoring his old house from, the police want to come search my house for fire and safety and crime prevention.
Mm-hmm.
And the landlord just said, if I let you in that house, I break the lease, and he can sue me. And you, basically.
You're absolutely right. There are laws that govern the relations between landlords and tenants, and landlords are not allowed to simply open the door and come in whenever they want, or they can be sued. And the landlord could possibly duck that by saying, well, the police ordered me to do it, but that, again, puts the onus for the unconstitutional activity back on the police. And we're seeing stories all over the place about the police are out of control. And what they're trying to create is a climate where you are automatically seized with fear when you see a police officer. That's part of that psychological propaganda. Police officer, I've got to huddle down and try not to do anything and hope I won't be noticed.
Mike, and about another story about the African dating scam. I've written that because a Christian lady down the street who was like 65 years old,
mm-hmm.
Got with these too good to be true, and I shared my story of how they use my pictures. But basically, she went to the airport last night only to find out that the person they're supposed to meet at the airport cashed in the ticket at the airport on the other side and left her hanging. And I kept telling her it's too good to be true. It's too good to be true.
The scammers are out there in full force. It's open season on gullible American public. And again, we are told that NSA's PRISM is watching all of our online activity, but they don't seem to be at all concerned about the cyber criminals and the scammers and the hucksters. They just want to make sure that we, the American people, aren't getting ready to stand up and demand emancipation from the Federal Reserve. And so it's another thing that makes this whole NSA spying a complete joke. If they're really about crime prevention, why aren't we seeing these Wall Street CEOs behind the mortgage-backed security fraud going to jail? Why are they not shutting down the criminal hackers and identity thieves? Well, because, identity theft protection is a big business. People are going on out there to LifeLock, and they're spending money, and it generates tax revenues. This government needs there to be cybercrime to keep this computer security business in profits. It's all about dragging more money out of you. Just like the medical establishment needs you to be chronically ill to make money, the computer security establishment, they need computers to be broken into and identity crime to be going through the roof to sell their product toward you. And again, that's another hallmark of a fascist economic state where you are being forced and coerced to buy products you ordinarily wouldn't want or need by all this fraud and fakery that's out there. It's like the old mafia protection scam. If you don't buy protection for your computer, something bad going to happen.
Well, the thing is, I use PayPal, cards, loading cards. Mm-hmm. I don't use my debit or credit card anymore online. I just get them loaded up.
It's probably a good way to go, and that way each card only has a small amount on there, and just by breaking the card, all they can get is the small amount on there. Gift cards is another good way to go for that. And, of course, you're paying a huge amount of money to the banks for that added security, and so they're perfectly happy that you're going to be doing that. But again, at this point, I'd suggest everybody give up all these plastic cards and go back to cash and carry. If you can't afford it, don't buy it on credit. Keep all your money at home except what you need in the bank to cover your outstanding obligations, because that Cyprus-style haircut's going to happen here. Next time there's a major downturn on the stock market, we're going to see that depositor haircut happen here. It's a guarantee. And what makes it pardon me for cutting you off, and I'll let you talk here in a minute. Part of what makes it easy for all these cyber criminals is the use of the plastic and its poor security and all the backdoors that are in that system put there by the NSA, supposedly for our security, but it's actually making us much less secure and wide open to criminals who discover and exploit those NSA backdoors.
Well, the thing is, Mike, even like with your email and every email is scam. How I learned to use what they call the IP header tracer, and I found out your email comes from Hawaii.
Yes,
but basically,
there's no secret there.
Well, I'm just saying if you got a scam or some beautiful woman, soliciting you, use the tracers. Find out where the email's really coming from.
Well, most of the scammers will obfuscate those headers. They know those headers are there to provide information, and they will basically go in. It's like the same people who do harassing phone calls, and they're able to basically block out the caller ID. So that's not a guarantee here. But again, the question is, if the U.S. government has spent several billion of our tax dollars to build this PRISM monitoring system to watch the computer networks, why aren't they going after the cyber criminals? Okay, we got to take a break for news and a couple of commercials here. I know we got another caller waiting on the line. Kevin, I'm going to ask you to wait here for about 6 minutes until we come back. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the corporate media is all about the Powerball winners. These three families are sharing zigableams of dollars, and I hope at least one of them is a reader of whatreallyhappened.com. We're going to go to the phones here. Kevin in North Carolina. Aloha. Kevin, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Aloha, dude.
Aloha.
I wasn't one of the three that won.
Darn. Well, thank you for calling anyway. I'm pulling your leg. What's on your mind?
No, I don't want to feel paranoid, but you don't hear or see anything in the media about Fukushima. And I was wondering if it was because there's a cloud of radiation floating over this country right now.
Well, it depends on what part of the country you're living in, and if you're in the Pacific Northwest, you're probably far more at risk from the leaks from Hanford than you are from Fukushima. We've been giving a lot more coverage to Fukushima here. It is a serious problem. It is starting to get coverage, more coverage in the American corporate media, not the TV, but like Reuters and Wall Street Journal are reporting that it's a major, major problem going on over there. The barrier they built to contain the groundwater has now overtopped. Now they're admitting that they've actually been dumping radioactive water in the ocean for at least 2 years. And the volume of radioactivity spewing out of Fukushima right now is greater than Chernobyl. So it is now officially the world's worst nuclear disaster, and it's definitely contaminating the Pacific. And the problem there is everyone says, oh, well, when you go so far away from Fukushima, the radiation isn't a problem. It isn't the radiation in the water or the air that is of primary concern. It is of concern, and I'm going back to doing my daily radiation readings here on the island of Oahu. The problem are the fish, the sea life, which are starting out right off the coast of Fukushima, and they're eating something and becoming contaminated, and then they migrate. And a tuna 10,000 miles away from Fukushima is still just as contaminated as a tuna 1 mile away from Fukushima. And so the issue is the safety of the food source. Now, we know after Fukushima first blew up, everybody in this country in officialdom was out there saying it's not a problem, radiation's actually good for you, and simply said, we don't need to test, because they didn't want any embarrassing numbers. And I remember Secretary of the Interior went up to Alaska and had a public news conference with the head of the Alaska Fishing Commission saying, we're perfectly safe here. Our products are healthy for you to buy and eat. We don't need to test. But I know from the cast and crew of Deadliest Catch, who came down to Hawaii for one of their end-of-the-year wrap-ups, and one of their crew was a big fan of the website and invited me to come on over and hang out with them. And off camera, they were all terrified of some kid going down to the shoreline in Alaska, grabbing a crab, putting up a radiation meter to it, and getting a high reading, and then posting it on YouTube. Because people, especially crabs, which are bottom feeders, as the radioactive debris sinters out of the water and settles on the bottom feeding fish and crabs and lobsters are going to be eating it up and ingesting it. And if you eat that crab or lobster, you're ingesting that radioactive contamination into yourself, and it just stays there for year after year, eventually leading to all kinds of medical problems. It is a major disaster, and they can't do a thing about it.
Yeah, and they're keeping it out of the media.
Well, they don't want to harm the Pacific fishing industry because it's making money right now. They don't want to harm the Alaska fishing industry and the crab industry. And so you're not going to be told that this stuff is dangerous, just like you're not being told that GMOs are dangerous, just like you're being told vaccines aren't dangerous. You've got to protect the business profits. And if some people, if you eat Pacific seafood and you come down with cancer, not a problem. It's another revenue opportunity because we've got this franchise cancer treatment centers, all over the country, and they'll treat your cancer for a reasonable price.
I just remember Chernobyl. They said a cloud of radioactivity floated all the way around the globe.
Oh, yeah, it did. I mean, if you have a really well-equipped laboratory to sample nucleotides, there are still nucleotides in the atmosphere left over from all the above-ground nuclear testing that's still floating around out there. And but this is a major, major problem. We're now basically 2 years. Now they're admitting they're dumping tons and tons of highly contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean. And there have been cases where they've taken samples of salmon off San Diego that turned out to be contaminated, but they don't want you to know about that because they want to go on selling you more salmon. But it is a major, major problem, and the effects from Fukushima in terms of cancers, leukemias, and other health consequences are going to be seen well into the future. And in a very real sense, this corporate greed and government acquiescence has really boxed in the world, because between the Fukushima toxifying the northern Pacific and actually now the southern Pacific, it's down there now, the Gulf of Mexico accident toxifying the seafood growing there in the Gulf of Mexico, the disasters with GMO crops that are not producing the same yields as their natural counterparts, we've reached a stage where there simply is not enough healthy food to feed the human population. So they're going to have to convince you to eat the less than healthy food and think it's really cool and fashionable to do so. And I remember in the movie of Judge Dredd, the first one, with Sylvester Stallone, there was this little robot rolling along with an advertisement on it saying, "Eat recycled food. It's good for the environment and okay for you." And that's we've reached that stage already.
So it's still not contained. Fukushima still.
It will never be contained. It will never be contained. And part of the problem, of course, is they built that thing right by the shore of the ocean to use the ocean for cooling, so they didn't have to build a big cooling tower. And by now, it's pretty much inescapable. There has been a real China syndrome. The ruins of those reactor cores burned through the floor of the power plant. They're down there in the ground. They're spontaneously fissioning. That's why we're getting these high readings of strontium and cesium. And that means the debris is basically, it's at the edge of an aquifer used for civilian water, and it's contaminating that. And, of course, it just sort of leaches out through the rock until it comes up on the floor of the ocean. And it could be seeping into the ocean hundreds of yards from shore, half a mile from shore. They don't really know. Nobody's doing any surveys because they don't want to have to release the results. The whole handling of this disaster has been just all about, oh no, we got to protect the nuclear industry, we got to protect General Electric, so some people get sick, small price to pay to maintain our corporate profitability. And that's because members of the U.S. Congress, they own stock in General Electric. And they don't want their stock to go down. And this thing is just getting worse and worse, and because of the recent increases in radiation, now the corporate media is having to report on it. They're still trying to downplay it and say, really, it's no big deal. It's still within the safety limits, until you remember that right after Fukushima, the U.S. government raised all of its official limits for maximum radiation exposure. Just sent them way, way up high so they could go on saying, you don't have to worry, the radiation release is within official safety limits. Well, they're just moving the safety limits around so they can go on saying that.
Spooky.
It's very spooky. Remember when Ann Coulter was out there saying a little radiation is actually good for you? And we didn't see her volunteer to go over to Fukushima to help clean up that mess with all those young college students who were being sent over there as a publicity stunt. See, these college kids know it's safe. They're over there shoveling the radioactive waste. Need to do a follow-up on their current health. Anything else, Kevin?
No, that's it, man. Hey, thank you, Michael, and God bless you.
All right, thank you very much here, and we're coming up on another break. Another commercial break here. The phone lines are open again, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. And it is a monstrous problem because it isn't just confined to Fukushima. It's the entire Pacific Ocean is being contaminated by this stuff. And we know the government and the corporate media don't want you to know how serious it is in order to protect the nuclear industry, the seafood industry. It's all about profitability, and the health and welfare of the people is at the bottom of the list of priorities. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones. Jim in Georgia. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I call it Nukushima, but you call it Fukushima. Whatever.
Well, that's the actual name of the city, but I think I like yours a lot better.
I know. The thing is, they're coming out now in today's paper. They said they're going to go down a half mile into the ground and put ice. Somehow they're going to try to shoot ice in the ground to stop it from going into the ocean. There was an article in the paper, the Atlanta Journal, this morning.
Yeah, I saw it. If CNN was reporting it as well. They're not talking about ice. They're talking about drilling down surrounding Fukushima and putting a network of pipes and basically hooking it up to a gigantic freezer unit to literally freeze the ground underneath Fukushima to stop any more leaks. I wonder how they're going to power that giant refrigeration unit. Oh, well, we'll just build another nuclear plant right next door and plug it into there. I think it's a little harebrained, and the problem is the damage is already done. they're
trying to offstep people to make people feel better, and it's not going to happen,
No, it isn't, because it just comes across as a very harebrained idea. Again, the damage is already done, and they can have a cooling unit around there, but if one or more of those reactor cores are in fact spontaneously fissioning, which seems to be the case, those cores are going to be putting out far more heat than that freezer unit's going to be able to deal with. And so it's they might as well throw up their hands and say, yeah, we can't do a thing about it. But you're right. They're coming up with this idea, we're going to freeze it, that's going to make it all better. And it's the latest in a long series of stories put out there about how we will fix it, and there's no need for you to stop importing your sushi from Japan. And stop eating Pacific seafood. And, of course, nuclear power, is something that we'll just put up with from now on. Of course, here in the U.S., we're now starting to see all these stories about nuclear power plant problems. San Onofre, another explosion at another plant, because they've been allowed to operate past the end of their expected lifespan to maximize profitability, and they're starting to show signs of serious breakdown because they haven't been properly cared for and maintained.
Okay, Michael, I had something else to touch on with you.
Certainly.
I was talking to my son. He makes $28,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
He has a child and a wife. And I was telling him that he has to claim his insurance on his income tax this coming year. And he didn't know that, which his company pays. I wrote all this down. His company pays $700 a year, and it costs him $24 a week, and what it comes out to is he's going to end up paying with the Social Security increase. Okay, it's going to cost him like $1,800 more a year.
Yeah,
he couldn't believe it, because normally he sits at the end of the year and waits for that check to come back from Social Security, Internal Revenue, but they're not going to get it this year.
No, they're not going to get the refund. It's
not just the Social Security increase. You're going to have to claim your insurance that the company pays for you
as income. Yes, the taxes are going up at the same time. The government has created a climate in which we, the American people, are no longer able to transform our labor into a decent living wage. And the bankers want more, and the government wants more, and at the same time, they're viewing it as an unwritten law of capitalism that labor should always be forced down to the lowest possible earnings, to maximize their profitability. And that is, of course, a very foolish way to be running an economy. Before you start taking money out at the top, you have to make sure that bottom is able to generate wealth through labor, because that's where all real wealth begins, the labor of the working people. And if you want to have a system that makes money with planned obsolescence and all the rest of it, that's all well and good and survivable as long as working people are able to earn the money to support that financial structure. But because of various government policies, the tax incentives that led American companies to send their manufacturing overseas, higher fees, higher rates, higher interest, higher taxes on everything, we have a system where they're scrambling to grab the money that's at the top, and there's very little new wealth coming in at the bottom. And it's got to collapse unless they change course.
I live between you and Hawaii, so I'm not going to eat the fish, so you better not either. Okay?
Yeah.
I love your show. Thank you, Michael.
Well, I'd be going more vegetarian in my diet. I'm still trying to lose another 40 pounds here, but I'd go vegetarian, but now all the vegetables are GMO, and I'm not sure but what they're more dangerous than the radioactive seafood coming out of the ocean, so we're kind of stuck here. Maybe it's time to start eating the tourists. They keep telling me it's tourism season out here, but they won't tell me what the bag limit is. All right, Jim, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And as long as we're on the topic of Fukushima, TEPCO is now admitting they are completely unable to control the radioactive water flooding out of Fukushima. It's been going on for 2 years, at least 300 to 400 tons every single day of radioactive water. And the new concern is because they've been sort of holding back all the groundwater behind this barrier, that the saturation of the soil has now undermined the foundations of what's left of that nuclear power plant and could lead to the buildings actually collapsing. And, of course, they had another big earthquake there the other day. Everything they're doing is all for public relations value. They can't do a thing about it. It got away from them. A real-life China syndrome. And as the levels of cesium and strontium continue to spike outside the buildings, these are not measurements inside the building, near the remains of the reactor itself. This is just outside the building, coming up through the ground. And that's why I am convinced they've got a spontaneous, uncontrollable nuclear fission going on underground inside the remains of one of those reactor cores. So, let's see. It's 3 times more cesium leaking than all of Chernobyl going on there. And TEPCO concerned that the buildings could topple. We already hit that one. Alrighty, I'm going to skip on back up here to the top of the talking points. We've talked enough about Fukushima. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Rand Paul is now out there demanding that Barack Obama be held accountable for the Benghazi cover-up. And it starts with the question, did Hillary Clinton tell the truth about Benghazi? When she testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in January, she testified she had no knowledge of a CIA gun-running operation in Benghazi. She's the Secretary of State. That was her consulate. She should know. Now, Clinton dodged the question by saying, you'll have to direct that question to the agency that ran the annex. Now, in March, the New York Times reported the CIA had, in fact, been involved with secret shipments of weapons to Syria for over a year. So 2016 is still years away, and although Hillary's loyal friends in Hollywood, whose wrath I felt in the aftermath of Vince Foster, are already producing a whole batch of these polish the turd movies to bolster her image. And we already have Hillary caught telling whoppers to the Congress and the people of the nation. Hardly an auspicious start for another would-be tyrant. And I don't know, what kind of movies are they making about her? Pirates of the Whitewater? Pirates of the Whitewater, The Ghost of Vince Foster? Or Brokebank Mountain, Revenge of the Cattle Futures Trades? Got to come up with a few more of those. We need to start making movie posters about Hillary, spoofing Hollywood for trying to polish her image and sell her as America's salvation. By the way, did you know she bears an uncanny resemblance to Ursabet Bathory? And you might want to go back and read about Bathory to get why that is important. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And getting back to the wars, emphasis on the plural, the Deputy Director of the Central Intelligence Agency is now sounding a warning regarding Syria. Not the same warnings we've been hearing about Assad is evil. He is expressing concern that the U.S. agenda in Syria to topple Assad and replace him with a pro-Western, pro-private central bank, pro-Israel puppet regime is not working out. And that if Assad is in fact brought down, the government that will take over is most likely going to be radically, violently opposed to the United States and its agenda. The law of unintended consequences here. And he's saying we may have moved too precipitously to get rid of Assad because all those hired mercenary groups, including Al-Qaeda, that the U.S. paid to go in and try and topple Assad, they see themselves as the new replacement government. It's one of the reasons they're fighting amongst each other right now. And the Syrian people aren't going to get rid of Assad, who most of them are actually supporting anyway, and then say, oh yes, dear United States government, please give us a brand new U.S.-approved government. It's not going to happen. And so this is turning out to be a major foreign policy disaster, but we're not allowed to say that, or we're a high threat in the eyes of the Pentagon here. There is a story that is being reported that an Iranian cargo plane bearing arms and ammunition was shot down over Damascus airport by the Free Syrian Army fighters. And that it crashed into the Damascus airport and started a fire. Now, at this point, there is no independent confirmation for this story. And it could simply be a way to try and link what's going on in Syria with Iran to try and build that case for war with Iran, because that's the end goal of this whole plan that Wesley Clark blew the whistle on back in 2004, I think it was. If the FSA did shoot down this Iranian cargo plane, what did they use to do that with? More surface-to-air man-portable rockets provided by CIA? Now, there was another story. The reason to doubt some of these stories coming out, because in recent weeks, Assad has been gaining ground. He's taking back his country. And the U.S. is trying to counter that, saying, oh, no, the heroic freedom fighters and revolutionaries, they're still gaining ground. And the reason to doubt that, of course, is, just because it's the United States government that's saying it. But there's another story that was floating around where supposedly Bashar al-Assad's motorcade was attacked. And they said the FSA said they targeted his motorcade and they fired rockets at him, but he's been seen alive and healthy and all in one piece on state television since then. And the Syrian government is denying the attack even happened. Now, when you are in a war and you are starting to lose, you certainly want to hide that from the soldiers who are fighting the war and from the taxpayers who are paying for the war. And throughout history, defeat militarily has come as a huge shock to the population of the losing country, such as Japan and Germany. When it finally became obvious they were losing that war, it shocked a lot of people because the propaganda had been saying, oh, we're victorious, we're heroic, we're out there, we're making great strides. Well, actually, no. We've kind of screwed this one up, and you're all going to have to live in servitude to the winning side in this war for the rest of your lives. Now, once again, we are seeing Israel crank up the propaganda regarding Iran. And over in Israel, their Minister for International Intelligence and Strategic Affairs, Yuval Steinitz, in an interview with the Washington Post, said Iran's nuclear program is cranking up under the new president, Hassan Rouhani. He's another Ahmadinejad. Don't trust him. They're just months away from building a nuclear bomb, which Israel's been saying since 1985. And he's out there saying Iran's entire nuclear program could be destroyed with just a few hours of airstrikes. Look, it's so easy to do. There's no reason not to go on and do that. And Israel's out there once again screaming nuclear wolf or nuclear duck, wanting America to go fight its wars for them. And I understand the U.S. government has its own agenda in Iran. They want Iran to accept private central banking. They want Iran to sell Iran's oil only for the U.S. dollar. And that overlaps with Israel's desire for Iran to be broken into little tiny harmless pieces. But there's something you need to remember as they crank up all this Iranian nonsense one more time. Iran has not launched a war of aggression in over 200 years. Certainly, since 1979, when the Iranians kicked out the U.S. puppet the Shah and decided to run their own country, they haven't invaded anybody. They've responded to an attack by Iraq, sponsored by the United States. But generally, as a culture, they prefer to live in peace. And they do live in peace. And Jews are not persecuted in Iran. Israel tried to approach the Iranian Jews and said, we'll give you a bunch of money to move down to Israel. And the Iranian Jews said, no, we're comfortable here. We've got friends, we've got family, we've got businesses. We're comfortable here. We're safer here than we would be in Israel itself. We're going to stay. Just absolutely rebuffed that. Now, since 1979, when Iran became an Islamic state, supposedly, they operate quite secularly, but since the Iranian Revolution, Israel has attacked Iraq in 1981, bombing the power station at Osirak, claiming it was a clandestine weapons factory. Subsequent examination of the ruins following the 2003 invasion proved Israel had lied. There was no clandestine bomb factory under that reactor like Israel has underneath Dimona. 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon, leading to the massacres at Sabra and Shatila. In 2003, Israel staged incursions into Gaza and Nablus. In September 2007, Israel bombed Syria, again insisting they were building a clandestine weapons laboratory. And again, there was no evidence to support Israel's claims. 2006, Israel attacked Lebanon again, killing 1,200 people, mostly civilians, including United Nations observers, and littered the landscape with landmines on the way out, which are still killing Lebanese to this very day. 2008, Israel again raided Gaza, killing over 100. Hamas agreed to a ceasefire and kept it for 6 months until November 4th, Election Day, United States, when Israel attacked again, killing 6 Hamas members and launching Operation Cast Lead. 1,300 Gazans, mostly civilians, were killed. Violations of international law included the use of white phosphorus, incendiary bombs against civilians and non-military targets. The United Nations investigated, but Israel refused to cooperate. In 2010, Israel attacked an international aid flotilla bringing food and medical supplies to Gaza in international waters. 9 people were murdered, including an American from New York. Since 1979, when the Iranian Revolution happened. And Iran has not started a war with anybody during that time. The United States has attacked El Salvador 1980, Libya 1981, Sinai 1982, Lebanon 1982 and 83, Egypt 1983, Grenada 1983, Honduras 1983, Chad 1983, the Persian Gulf 1984, Libya 1986, Bolivia 1986, Iran 1987, Persian Gulf 1987, Kuwait 1987. The list goes on and on and on, and I'm running out of time in this segment. But here's the point of Israel, Iran, and the United States. Which one is the least threat to world peace? It's Iran. They are not in the habit of invading other countries and launching wars. That's their record for the last 200 years. It's Israel that can't seem to go 6 months without attacking somebody. It's the United States which can't seem to go 6 months without attacking somebody. Going to grab a quick phone call here. Jack Rabbit in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I just wanted to throw a crazy idea out there.
Okay.
You know, this machine thing, I wonder if there's any kind of obviously you can't contain radiation. It's already been dispersed. However, I wonder if there was a way to really block things off so that no more leakage occurs, and then use the energy of that reactor instead of a still. You distill the water out, capture all that radioactive waste as a product of that. You know, I mean, I know they're in big trouble out there, but something to think about. It's a lot of energy there. That's what distilling is all about, a lot of wasted energy.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and it's an interesting idea, and I think it would have been a smart thing to do when they were first starting to capture the water, because distillation is a really good way to separate the water from the waste. I don't know what isotopes would be taken up in the steam or not. We'd have to do some skull sweat on that one. The problem is, by not doing anything except containment for 2 years, they've hit a point where that's no longer an option, because the problem isn't the water still in the reactors, it's the water that saturated the ground, overtopped the flood control, and seeping out through the ocean floor. And that they can't get back. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I actually did have an idea what they should have done about Fukushima back when it happened. And the radiation was in just a small contained area. And it would have been hideously expensive, but it would have worked. If you go out and look at the map of the Pacific Ocean, like in Google Earth, you will find dozens and dozens of islands uninhabited, with extinct volcanoes on them. These are not subduction zone volcanoes that can re-erupt. These are former hotspot volcanoes. They're absolutely dead and are never going to come back to life ever again. And the walls of a volcano that has ceased erupting, there's a giant tube goes down the middle, and the walls are congealed lava, which has the structural strength of poured concrete. They're gigantic. And that would have been, should be, the place to dump all the world's radioactive waste. Just put it in this one giant extinct volcano, because it takes thousands and thousands of years for any water inside that crater to seep through the lava back out to the ocean. And by then, most of those isotopes have decayed to harmlessness. But it would involve gigantic digging machines and some way to transport to the island and up the slope. Nobody wanted to spend the money because we're too busy dropping trillions of dollars on Wall Street to save them from the mortgage-backed security fraud. So they went with the lowest cost option at Fukushima, which is do nothing and hire a public relations firm to tell everybody it's okay. If we're going to keep on flirting with fission-based nuclear power, we might want to look at building those giant reactor power stations inside the craters of extinct volcanoes to contain a meltdown. But that would cost too much. We can't do that. We have a responsibility to the stockholders. Well, your stockholders are also going to come down with cancer and leukemia for letting this one get completely out of control. Interesting little story coming out regarding the NSA. There's been another NSA whistleblower basically saying that the way the data collection is set up is that anytime they go out to deal with a foreigner, inevitably they have to gather data on U.S. citizens because of that 3 degrees of separation. And the reason Obama is out there saying we don't have a domestic spy program is they're saying we're just over collecting the data, and it isn't really a Fourth Amendment violation until we actually look at it. This is like a burglar coming into your home and stealing your wife's jewelry, but saying it really isn't a theft until I pawn or fence the jewelry or trade it for drugs. And that's complete nonsense. But they're still out there in full spin cycle trying to say that, no, it really isn't spying and it's not a violation of the Constitution. And you know something? That's not up to you, the government, to decide. It's up to we the people. It's right up there at the top of that Constitution. We the people. It's our country. It's our Constitution. It's our Bill of Rights. You don't get to tell us what it means. We will decide for ourselves. We have the freedom to decide for ourselves what those amendments mean. Like the Second Amendment. The gun grabbers are always trying to redefine it. Oh, it's a collective right. It really means the Army and the police and the National Guard have guns. It doesn't mean you, the individuals. Yes, it does. And there is a Supreme Court decision that validates that, but I didn't need the Supreme Court to tell me that. That's our Bill of Rights. It's not the property of the United States government. They don't have a right to tamper with it or try and change its meaning. What that Bill of Rights and Constitution means is up to we the people. All righty. So let's see. Moving right along. By the way, getting back to this whole NSA thing and the idea that this so-called 20 Al-Qaeda conference call was not revealed by an NSA tape but was given to the United States by an unnamed foreign government. There was an article over at Daily Beast talking about this Al-Qaeda conference call, and they cited as one of their sources for information the Site Intel Group. And it's listed as an American private terrorist threat analysis company. Now, you need to pay very close attention to this site group. They're used as a source for a lot of stories claiming Al-Qaeda is coming to get us. They're going to sneak into our bedroom and tear the tags off our couch cushions, short sheet our bunk beds, and steal the left-handed socks out of our drawers. Now, this is actually an Israeli intelligence operation. It's run by a lady named Rita Katz, whose father was executed as an Israeli spy. And they, like memory, exist and are funded to just keep up this constant stream of propaganda about how you've got to be afraid of the Muslims. You've got to hate those Arab Muslims. And that's the meme that's constantly coming out. John McCain is back in the news again screaming about why Al-Qaeda hates us. And Elheman saw and say, yeah, dropping drone strikes on them and everything's probably angering them, but really, fundamentally, they hate us for our freedoms. They're still trying to play that one. People don't hate freedoms. People don't hate other people's freedoms. We all want to be free. It is the ruling structure that hates freedoms and wants to take them away, as demonstrated by the federal government. It wants to take away your freedom to keep and bear arms, to protect yourself from criminals in an age where the police are just not there anymore. They want to take away your freedom to speak out against the government with free speech zones, and now they're saying that anybody who speaks out against U.S. foreign policy is a terror suspect. It's government, it's rulers, church leaders who want to take away freedom. Ordinary Muslims around the world do not hate America for our freedoms. They hate America because as they're going about their daily lives in their village square, all of a sudden there's a blinding explosion. People they've known their entire lives are dying in bloody shreds at their feet, and the shrapnel is all stamped Made in America. You cannot have something like that happen to you and remain entirely cheerful. So the U.S. attitude is we bomb these people and they hate us for it, therefore we have to go out and bomb them some more. And by the way, there's been a repeat, apparently, of this tactic the U.S. has been using of setting off a drone strike, waiting for the first responders to get there, the ambulance, the police, the medics, and then drone striking again to take those people out. That's a war crime. That is absolutely a war crime because those police and firefighters and paramedics are not combatants. They are not considered combatants. The drone strikes into Yemen are continuing. They claim a drone strike killed 4 suspected al-Qaeda members in a Jeep. No names. No proof that these people had actually done anything deserving a death sentence. Another drone strike claiming to have killed 9. What is really alarming, though, is that apparently a video has surfaced on YouTube showing one of the drone strikes hitting a target in the middle of a gigantic anti-American rally, which guarantees a lot of people got killed and injured, along with the suspected target. And the U.S. attitude is, we don't need to give you proof. We say these are bad people and they're terrorists. Well, how do you know they're terrorists? Well, they're dead. You don't think the American government would kill innocent people? Of course they would. All right, we're going to go on to the economy now because there's a lot of stuff going on. The stock market is kind of happy today. And, just ticking right along. The Asian markets were up last night. And again, it's all propery and fakery and keeping it up because when the stock market takes its next correction downward, it's going to render most of those Wall Street too-big-to-fail firms instantly insolvent. And that's the motivation for tinkering with the stock market in a nation that has lost most of its agricultural exports due to GMOs, most of its manufacturing. According to an analyst reporting over in the New York Post, Wall Street is feeling the pinch. The level of financial activity in the general population has declined to the point where they're looking at more layoffs on Wall Street. As much as 100,000 workers in those big banks because there's nothing for them to do. The computers are just gaming the stock market back and forth, but ordinary day-to-day banking business has just fallen off. And we could see 100,000 workers on Wall Street get laid off. So let's all feel bad for those workers on Wall Street. Let's all feel bad for them. All righty, let's see here. We seem to have hit our music. Okay, there we are, just a little bit early. We got to take a break for news for Phyllis Schlafly. And again, you might want to listen to what she's saying about Common Core because I'm absolutely in agreement with that. We'll be back after Phyllis Schlafly and commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. Dan, the man, is now in our control room. The phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. We have a caller waiting on the line. Kent in West Virginia. Aloha, Kent. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, you were talking a few minutes earlier about how people aren't fighting because they hate Americans or because they like to fight. It's only because their family members are being killed and they've taken up the gun for out of honor and defense. And I recommend anybody and everybody try to see a documentary called Frank Kern's, Kearns, Frank Kern's, American Correspondent. It was done here in West Virginia. He was a West Virginian who was a CBS correspondent at the time of Edward R. Murrow, in the 50s and 60s. And he was accused of being a CIA agent, which I guess really disturbed him. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But anyway, it's a brilliant documentary about his career. And one of his assignments was to go up into, I believe it's the Atlas Mountains in Algeria at the time of the French-Algerian War. Mm-hmm. And he had through great difficulty gone up into the mountains. And this was a black and white. And if you could colorize it today, it would be exactly the same. But he's huddled down there behind the rocks in the mountains with these guys heads wrapped, and and they're wearing their traditional gear with the AKs, and he's standing there looking at the camera with his microphone. And these men are not fighting because they hate the French. They're not fighting because they like to fight. They're fighting only because their brothers, their sisters, their sons, their daughters, they've seen them all killed by French bombing, and that's why they're in. I swear to God, if you could take it and do it, it's just exactly the same 50 years later. I was just knocked over by seeing that. And there was another instance where they talked to another correspondent. He had been stationed in I think Sweden or someplace Scandinavia, and he had no qualms about saying he worked for us. He said, "Yeah, well, one day, I walked out the door in the morning and I was a correspondent, and on another day I was a CIA agent." So, but I recommend anybody seeing that. It's a great documentary.
Okay, what was the name of the documentary again? I was trying to find it while you were talking.
It's called Frank Kearns, Kearns, American Correspondent. It's www.frankkearnsproject.com.
I got it. I just found it. I'm going to link it to whatreallyhappened.com.
Yeah, it's I don't know if it's for sale or what, but I mean it's really great, very, very good.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. We're going to let you go here. I mean, seriously, let's walk a mile in the other guy's moccasins here. If you're in a country, let's just say you're living here in the United States. You're going to work, you're taking care of your family, you're raising your kids, you're socializing with your neighborhood, and all of a sudden some foreign government comes in, starts dropping bombs on you and say, you have to change your leadership to somebody that we like. Would you just say, yeah, okay, sure, we'll go along with that? Or would you understand you're being invaded, and that the invading power is not going to treat you better than your current government? It is going to treat you far, far worse, force you to be dependent on imports from that conquering country, force you to be dependent on their economic and banking system, force you to sell your labor and your natural resources at below market prices to favor their corporations. Would you go along with that? Or would you have a certain resentment to that invading country that's trying to hijack you? Take you over? Would you fight back? I think most people would. That's what's going on in these other countries. They see the United States invading country after country after country to take them over politically and economically, all on the basis of complete, absolute lies, and they're fighting back. They don't hate America for its freedoms. They hate the American government for what that government is doing. And a lot of Americans are starting to basically sign online to that. Now, Fox News is making a big deal out of this story that apparently a recent poll is showing 74% of Americans think that Americans rely too much on the government and not enough on themselves, and even more so that the government seems to be forcing this on us. Yeah. Remember, enforced dependency is the hallmark of tyranny. If we're all dependent on the government, we won't stand up and say the government is wrong. That's why they want us all on food stamps, so that if we speak out against the government, we don't get to eat next week. That's why they're out there advertising, come on, get on the food stamp program. We're handing these cards out to everybody. They want you to be dependent, because dependent people are enslaved people. And that kind of enforced dependence is something Americans traditionally do not respond well to. That's why we fought the American Revolution. Before the Revolution, the government of Great Britain forced us to be dependent on banknotes loaned at interest from the Bank of England for all commerce, which made the Bank of England rich and Americans poor. The government of Great Britain forced us to be dependent on the British East India Company for all our imported goods. We were not allowed to trade with anybody else. They forced us to be dependent on the knitting mills of Manchester and Leeds for all of our clothing, because enforced dependency is what leads to profitability for those institutions you are forced to be dependent on. And that's why the American Revolution was fought. And that's why July 4th is remembered as Independence Day. Not Freedom Day, not the day we kicked the British out. It's Independence Day, the day when America became free to decide its own course, to trade with any nation on earth they chose to for the best products at the lowest prices, to have their own government-issued interest-free currency instead of banknotes forced on them by the Bank of England, to set up their own knitting mills and factories, to make their own products for export. And so apparently 3/4 of Americans already see the government as forcing us into a state of dependency and subservience. And they're starting to say so. And so the corporate media is going on, oh, what does this really mean? What does this really mean? It means that Americans are sick and tired of the nanny state. They want emancipation. They want the freedom to chart their own life's course. They want the freedom to decide how they're going to live and not have some government person tell them that. Freedom means leave me alone. Stop telling me how to live my life. Stop telling my kids where they have to go fight and die. Stop telling me how I have to paint my house. There's apparently a big, huge stink going on about this family in one of these housing developments that has a homeowners association. And they wanted to change the landscaping in front of their home to something that was far more environmentally friendly than what was mandated in the CCNRs for the homeowners association. And they went through the paperwork trail. They got the permit from the homeowners association. They got the gold certification that their new front lawn was environmentally friendly. And the homeowners association changed their mind, came back and said, no. Your lawn has to look exactly like the lawn next to you, which looks exactly like the lawn next to them. And it resulted in a lawsuit, and the judge finally came out and said, look, they followed the rules to have their new front lawn. You can't do anything about it. I sometimes wonder if the few surviving Nazi war criminals are hiding out in the United States masquerading as presidents of homeowners associations. Because doesn't it make sense if you bought that home and you own it, you can do whatever you want with it. Now, obviously, allowing the property to deteriorate to where it represents a health and safety hazard, I can understand a certain amount of reasonable control. But telling people what color their house is going to be, what color and what shape the mailbox has to be, what their front lawn has to look like, that's not America. And I don't care if it's a private homeowners association. They're way, way out of line on that one. All righty, let's see here. Over in Greece, they're now admitting their youth unemployment has hit a record 65%, and I think we can safely presume the government of Greece is fudging their job numbers pretty much to the same extent the United States is. That's really bad stuff. Got to take a break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, we're talking about the crashing economy over there in Greece. And youth unemployment is now admitted to be 65%. It's probably far worse. People can't get jobs over there, which means they can't pay taxes, which means Greece, for all this shuffling around of money and obligations, can't pay off its loans to the private central bank. And I don't think they ever could. You reach a point where it becomes impossible, and everybody's just trying to shuffle stuff around to paper it all over. That's how Greece got into this mess as deep as they did. That underhanded deal between Goldman Sachs and Papandreou to conceal Greece's actual debt behind some currency swaps, which made Goldman Sachs a lot of money and doubled Greece's debt. And the Greek people are starting to basically break free from the government. They're engaging in guerrilla-style stunts to try and keep going here, as more and more Greek homes are being shut off from the electric power for non-payment of their bills. They're just going back out there and reconnecting. It's reached a point where the people of Greece are absolutely not concerned with what the government says they should be doing anymore. It's down to a matter of survival. The system is broken. It's not working. And we're in the same situation here in the United States of America. Take a look around at what's going on in this country and just ask yourself honestly, is this system actually working, or is it just thrashing around in the throes of death spasms, looking for a place to fall down? I think it's definitely very much the latter. Something on a little lighter level, a listener sent in a photograph they took at a post office showing the display for all the stamps that you can buy from the post office with all the little pretty pictures. And I'm rather pleased to see they've stopped putting out the one with the American flag on there because people don't want to buy it. When I go to buy stamps, I'll take anything but the American flag. And on this little display sign at the post office, the word forever has now been crossed out on all the images of the stamps. Looks like forever wasn't really forever. The post office is getting ready to do something dramatic like raise rates and invalidate the earlier forever stamps. Oh, you can't use those anymore. You have to buy new, more expensive stamps. I think the rationale behind the increase in postal rates isn't delivery, but rental and storage, because every time they raise the postal rates, it seems like the mail takes longer and longer to get from point A to point B, and so they're just charging us for storage and rent. You mail a letter over here, used to take 3 days to get over here to Hawaii, now it's taking 8 days, and they figure they got to charge you for holding the mail the additional 5 days here. Now, if you are living in London and you have some extra money to play with and you're looking for an absolutely pristine, prestige address in one of London's wealthiest neighborhoods, you have the opportunity of a lifetime. They have now put up for sale a disused London subway station, which during World War II housed London's anti-aircraft defense command center during World War II. You've seen it in the movies. They got the table with the little wood things on there, and they're pushing them around, all the girls standing around with headphones saying, planes coming in from here. That place, it's now actually up for sale. And I imagine that it would actually be cool for somebody to buy that and turn it into a themed restaurant. In a healthy economy, I'm sure it would be a hit. And I know that because when I still lived in Southern California, one of my absolute favorite restaurants was over at the Van Nuys Airport, was called the 94th Arrow. I don't even know if it's still there anymore, but it was all done up as a French farmhouse being used for a World War I air squadron, and they had these recreations of the Fokker triplane and the Sopwith Camel parked out front, which was weird because they were on opposing sides and never actually parked together. But it was good French food, and it was real nice ambience. And so if I had money and was living in London, I'd seriously look at buying that place and turning it into a themed restaurant. Now, an interesting development with Bitcoin. There has been a ruling by a federal judge in Texas declaring Bitcoin is a currency, not just a cyber currency, not just a cryptocurrency. It is a legal currency and has to be regulated just like U.S. dollars or gold, meaning Wall Street gets to rig it like crazy for their own profitability. They want to bring it under control so it can't ever be a threat to the Federal Reserve System. That's what's going on here. They're hijacking it. I want to talk a little bit about some of the police abuses we're seeing out there as a prelude to some other concerns that we have here. Got this article about these safety checks, security checks, where the police are just going into apartments at random. Say, hi, we're the police, we're here for a safety check, we get to look at everything. No warrant, no probable cause. We're just here to make sure that you are okay. And, of course, I would stand at the front door and say, I'm just fine, thank you for calling. Close the door in their face, because they don't have any business to come in there. Story out of Escambia County, Florida. This is in From the Trenches World Report, where apparently this family, who were already in bed asleep at 10:30 at night, last night, were awakened by police who literally broke into their bedroom, coming through the window, and shot their pet dogs. Now, the police claim they were looking for a person of interest and decided it was okay to start going into homes to see if the guy was hiding there. They had no evidence. The suspect was there. They had no warrant. They just said, hey, we're the police. We're going to go into this house and make sure the guy isn't there. And the people in the house were thrown on the floor with police boots on their back. No warrant. No probable cause, just the police saying we can do whatever we want. This government has told us it's open season on ordinary Americans. We've got to ramp up the terror so that people are just automatically afraid when they see a police uniform. Certainly more afraid than the criminals are, who are pretty much left untouched by the police department, because if crime went away, we, the taxpayer, would say it's time to shrink down those police departments. Oh, no, you can't shrink the police department. There's lots of crime out there. It's because the police never show up in time to stop the crime. They show up after it's all over. pose with the dead bodies in their nice uniforms and shiny badges for the press cameras and say, see, we're the police department. We're in control here. Another story out of Florida. Apparently an 18-year-old kid who was caught tagging died after being tased by the police. Just put him right into cardiac arrest, and he died. It is time to stop pretending that tasers are non-lethal. We have had experts on this show, cardiac experts, who say if that 35,000-volt shot hits you at the exact right point in the heart's cycle, it'll stop the heart cold, and you will die. These things are not non-lethal, but the police are given them. They say it's non-lethal, and they're out there killing Americans with these tasers, and there's no consequences to the police because, hey, they're non-lethal. If this person died, I guess there was something wrong with him. There's no reason to think that the police and their overuse of these tasers had anything to do with it. Another story, this was reported in newsforge.com, where apparently a paramedic who had treated a family for a panic attack, family member for a panic attack, saw a TV remote control in the bedroom and thought it was a gun. Left the house, called the police. The police kicked in the door, harassed and terrorized these people because the paramedic couldn't tell the difference between a TV remote and a gun. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about some of the over-the-top, completely out-of-control police behavior in this country. We're talking about this story here where a paramedic who was at the home to treat the wife for a panic attack spotted the TV remote in the bedroom and just assumed it was a firearm. Now, we know the government has been going out to postal workers and paramedics and the rest with that see something, say something, and this guy apparently called the cops and said, I think there was a firearm in that bedroom. And the police, without checking to see if they had a registered firearm, literally kicked down the door in the middle of the night. This couple, Michelle Malone and Keith Abrahams, were just rousted out of bed by armed police, thrown in a police van. The police proceeded to tear their home apart, did not find anything illegal, did not find a gun. How much time and money are the police wasting with these armed paramilitary raids into the homes of innocent people? Got another story somebody just sent in here. Austin SWAT confines resident to his own home. It's just completely out of control there. Completely out of control there. Alrighty, now that's sort of a prelude to this story. Apparently in the year 2011, they finally have the statistics. 1 out of every 25 Americans were arrested in the year 2011. Coming out of all the stop and frisk policies, mass incarceration, 1 out of every 25 Americans. If you know more than 30 people, at least one of them got arrested for nonsensical things. We've been hearing Phyllis Schlafly, top of the hour, was talking about how kids are being thrown out of school for pointing pencils and going bang bang or having toy soldiers on cupcakes because their dad is in the military. This is a repressive state. And that's what all these police tactics are about. They're not interested in getting rid of the crime because the crime justifies their salaries. They have been told to repress law-abiding American people, to make you scared of police uniforms. So when those police uniforms show up at your protest against the bankers, you'll cower in fear and shrink away, they think. There was a bit of a brouhaha over this apartment complex policy where they basically, and this is an apartment complex for seniors, and they said from now on nobody in the apartment complex is allowed to own any firearms at all to keep you all safe. If somebody's breaking in to steal your valuables, call the police and they will show up. Average wait time for a 911 call in America right now is running about 19 minutes. In Detroit, it's over an hour. In Georgetown, if you and your female roommates are being raped, it's apparently overnight. So the members of the board of this association governing this apartment complex said no guns are allowed in the complex. That has now been thrown out because it is a clear violation of the Second Amendment. And we, the people, get to decide what that Second Amendment means. And for me, what it means is we, the people, have a right to keep and bear arms equal, if not superior, to those in the hands of the criminals, especially in an age where the police are never there to thwart a crime in progress. And we know those criminals, they've got all the latest modern military-style weapons. They've been getting them from Fast and Furious. Now, out in California, another setback for the gun grabbers. This last March, this man had his guns seized by the state after his wife spent 3 days in the hospital over supposed psychological issues. She was released perfectly okay, but the state of California said, oh, you've got a mentally ill person in your house. You're not allowed to have guns any longer. And he took it to court. And they had a medical opinion that the woman's symptoms were triggered by an adverse reaction to her prescription medication that resulted in her crying uncontrollably. So here we have prescription medication provoked a psychological result. She checked herself into the hospital to say, help me. And the state of California said, oh, she's mentally deficient, we can take your guns away. State of California finally returned the guns to the guy, but kept the ammunition. And that's the beginning of a trend we're seeing all across the country, where if they can label you as having some kind of a mental illness, they'll say that's grounds for suspending your Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. Now, I'm sure from the point of view of the British, that all those Americans who were stockpiling military arms against British oppression, oh, they had to be mentally ill. Anybody who doesn't believe in the divine right of King George III, you've got to be crazy, and we can take your guns away from you, which they tried to do at Lexington and Concord, and that didn't work out too well. Now, apparently the U.S. government, as part of the continuing effort to protect the profitability of the corporate media, they're now looking at designating illegal online streaming as a felony. Up until now, it's been a misdemeanor. If you take somebody's copywritten work and you post it onto YouTube, and they complain beyond the takedown notice, you can be hit with a misdemeanor, which is usually a fine. Now the Obama administration is reviving part of the Stop Online Piracy Act, which was voted down, to make putting somebody else's copywritten work up on your YouTube account as a felony, meaning prison for multiple years. And I'm not in agreement with posting people's copyrighted work, but I think corporate media is trying to unfairly scapegoat online pirates for their declining revenues, when the reality for the declining revenues is they're not making anything new and interesting. We're getting a constant regurgitation of commercially produced rock music that sounds just like what we heard the year before, which sounds just like what we heard the year before. And the lyrics are devoid of any content other than, I'm hip, I'm cool, I'm wearing the latest fashions. And I want to get laid, with the perennial favorite here. Same thing with TV. Constant reruns, new shows that are just redos of the old shows that worked before. Nothing new and insightful. All of it hideously politically correct. And people are tuning out. And that's why these corporate media outlets are losing so much money. The content pirates are just a tiny part of it. Somebody actually did a study and found that people who are downloading pirated MP3s of music were actually more likely to go out and buy the DVD or the CD because their curiosity had been piqued. Ooh, this is a hip song. I want the rest of the album. And they'd go on down to the store and buy the album. So I'm opposed to content piracy, but I'm also opposed to corporate media blaming the content pirates for their financial woes, when it's really their choice of what productions get greenlit and their constant enslavement to various political agendas, like endless movies about Nazis, zombie Nazis and werewolf Nazis and vampire Nazis and Santa Claus versus the Nazis. We're sick and tired of World War II and the Nazis. Come up with something new. How many times can we be told the story of Superman or Batman? Can practically recite the whole thing from memory by now. Come up with something new. Apparently, the U.S. Air Force got caught flying 24 tons of cocaine into Miami from Costa Rica. The official story is that the Costa Rica's drug interdiction program had suffered a setback because their incinerator where they would burn all this stuff up was broken, and they were tired of stockpiling it. So they just gave it to the Air Force, and the Air Force flew it into Miami, supposedly to be destroyed there. Well, if they wanted to destroy 24 tons of cocaine, all they had to do was kick open the back door of that C-17 and just dump it out into the ocean, and it would be gone. If they brought it into Miami, something tells me probably not all of it is going to wind up in the incinerator. The government drug smuggling is now just out in the wide open. Remember, that was the big scandal behind Iran-Contra, behind Whitewater, behind the Clintons' rise to power, government-sanctioned drug running to finance the covert supply to the Nicaraguan Contras. Untraceable guns and ammunition down, cocaine coming back, and everybody got rich off the whole program. And by the way, that's a story that's not going to go away. And a little bird tells me it's going to be a big issue come 2016. Alrighty, we're going to take another break here. Back with the last segment of our show after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently they've already got a former police officer being interviewed on CNN regarding that 18-year-old kid who died from being tasered in Miami, and the cop is out there towing the company line. Tasers are non-lethal. They had every right to use it. If the kid died, there had to be something wrong with him because tasers are non-lethal. No, they are not. Tasers are police brutality with all the modern improvements. They are not non-lethal. It's basically a cattle prod for humans. And people die when they are tased, for reasons we have scientifically verified. But as long as the police are taking that position, it's non-lethal. It's not our fault he's dead. There had to be something wrong with him. It was the parents' fault for not having the doctors check out his heart. Blah, 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 blah. A listener wrote in a very interesting comment. If the NSA is copying off all of our online traffic, that means they're also downloading these copywritten movies and MP3s that they're finding on people's servers. So how is the NSA now exempt from online piracy? We already know they're listening to the phone calls of our serving military in the war zones, listening to this sexy talk. Ooh, baby, when I get back from Iraq, I'm going to do, so forth and so on. And they trade it around like free porn. The NSA cannot be intercepting all of your online traffic without also intercepting illegally traded torrents, BitTorrent traded movies and stuff. They're now equally guilty of online piracy. Book 'em, Dano. Interesting little story from the environmental movement here. Over in Great Britain, as part of their desire to reduce their carbon footprint and become carbon neutral, they started converting some of their power stations away from burning coal to burning wood chips, because trees will grow and take the carbon out of the air, and then we can burn them and put the carbon back in the air, and that will be carbon neutral. But apparently nobody was really thinking beyond that soundbite, because it turns out Great Britain doesn't have enough forests to supply the wood chips for these wood-burning power stations. And so now Great Britain is having to import trees from the United States to be ground up into wood chips to burn in these previously coal-fired power plants. Does that really make any sense at all to anybody except a carbon Nazi? I mean, how much diesel fuel are they burning up on those cargo ships to bring those trees from the United States to Great Britain to be put in their carbon-neutral power plant? I remember one time when I was living in Washington State, and you're not going to believe this one. They wanted to build a new restroom facility in this parkland. And because of all the environmental laws, they didn't want to run in electrical power lines. They wanted to protect the trees. And so they built this commode that was powered with solar cells on the roof. They built it underneath a gigantic tree that kept the sun from hitting the solar cells. And in order to solve that problem, they wound up cutting down the tree. I know this stuff all seems to make sense when they're out there with their sound bites on the media, but it just chases around in circles, and they wind up doing more damage than good. They should have had either a commode that didn't require electricity in it, which so many of them did. It's called an outhouse. And if the solar cells were going to be used to power this thing, site the solar cells where the sun happens to be. But no, they put the solar cells on the roof of a building built under a spreading tree and then solved the problem by cutting the tree down when protecting the tree was supposed to be the original agenda behind all of this stuff. Meanwhile, down in Brazil, you probably remember Brazil, really close to the equator, warm part of the planet. Apparently, they have been hit with a snap cold spell in July. 3 people have died being caught in the cold, freezing to death without adequate clothing. People in Brazil are posting photos to social media of the snow that is falling down there. They're making snowmen in Brazil in July. They're blaming an unexpected cold front coming up from Antarctica. The summer season in the Arctic is now over. It's back below freezing. Summer in the Arctic is defined as the number of days that the Arctic temperatures are above freezing. And this has been the shortest Arctic summer on record. More disturbing news from Greenland. There is no ice meltdown. Remember 10 years ago, the former head of Greenpeace was all over the TV saying in 20 years there'll be no ice on Greenland at all. It'll all be water in the ocean drowning our coastal cities. That was a 20-year forecast he made 10 years ago. We should be halfway through that ice loss. Greenland still has all of its ice. In fact, it actually has a little bit more. It was all a lie to trick you out of carbon taxes, to trick you out of obedience, to get you to live on less so the money junkies can have more. We're now looking at the second largest Arctic ice gain on record this year. It may even move into the number 1 spot by the end of the year. See, an interesting story from the science frontier. Apparently, Harvard scientists have created an artificial telepathic link between human and rat brains. Harvard Medical School has created a prototype calling a non-invasive brain-to-brain interface between humans and rats, which allows them to share information with each other. I thought Congress had done that decades ago. But apparently, according to Harvard, it's brand new. All right, we're coming up on the top of the show. And I want to reiterate a question that I asked earlier in the program. Is the American system still working? Corporate media is telling you the economy is fine, everything's great, the wars are going really well. But we understand that for a nation to work as a system, all the components have to be running. For an economy to work as a system, money must flow freely in all levels of the economy to all necessary sectors of the economy. As you walk around your hometown looking at the commercial vacancies, the homeless population, you need to ask yourself honestly, is America still working? Or has the system already locked up and what we're seeing are the money junkies fighting with each other over those last few coins in the pockets of the people? It almost seems like they've given up trying to save the country itself, and now it's just a free-for-all scrambling for that last bit of coinage that's out there, that last bit of wealth, the gold confiscation, the gun confiscation. I think America, as we have known it, is long gone. I think this financial system and government are in their final days. It's being held together with propaganda, lies, fraud, deception, spit, and baling wire. And it only works as long as you believe the lies. And it's time for us to all become federal government heretics and Federal Reserve heretics and say, we don't believe any longer. We will decide for ourselves whether this system works or not. Because it's time to make those choices, make those decisions. Do we go on sacrificing our own lives, our own standard of living, the future of our children, propping up a system that can't survive? Or do we cut our losses now, repeal our allegiance, retract our allegiance to a failed system and say, we're going to take care of ourselves, we're going to become independent, and you just, Federal Reserve and federal government, you just walk off onto the corner and flop down dead out of the way where you cause as little damage as possible from the crash. We know the money junkies will never do that. They're already looking at how they can really crank up World War III to a global conflict and plunge everybody back into debt, trading hundreds of millions of human beings for a little more gold in their pocket. That's their plan. And it worked 2 times before. I don't think it's going to work this time because we're on to their scam. We're on to the scam why private central banking inevitably leads to world wars. We've had enough of it. We've had enough of rule by compound interest. We've had enough of rule by slavery. We've had enough of rule by divine right, and most of all, rule by lies. And it's time for them to go away. There's the music. It's time for us to get on out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, with Claire joining us on the show here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please support Republic Broadcasting. We cannot continue to operate without your help. We need your help to get on-air affiliates. We need your financial support to keep reaching those affiliates. We don't get big checks from companies like Monsanto. We don't get any of that at all. It is up to you. This is your network. Please step in and help. Aloha, America.